You take Buster Bluth from Arrested. I really connected to Buster. I've dealt with anxiety. I love doing comedy. I love kind of showing the dysfunction of life. But then he had this kind of really sweet spirit to him. You look at Veep. Yes, Veep is people might consider that a really intense show. To me, it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Of a woman who lived her entire life only thinking about herself.
Summer is the time for movies, and a lot of you are going to the theater a lot these days. And there's a new movie that's coming out that I want to talk about today with my guest, Tony Hale, who's a two-time Emmy Award-winning actor. You know him from Arrested Development. And he has this new movie, this new project called Sketch, which I just watched last week, and we're going to talk about. It's hard for me to know exactly how to describe it to you without spoilers, but we will try to do that. Hale and his family live in Los Angeles. Tony, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. We actually just moved to Alabama.
Did you? Where?
Yeah, we just moved to, my daughter graduated high school last May, and we need to be closer to family because we'd been away from family for like 30 years. So we moved to Birmingham.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Before we talk about the movie, what is your spiritual background?
What is my spiritual Let's just dive right in. What is my spiritual background? I was raised Baptist. Actually, I was raised a lot of things. I was a bit of a mutt when it comes to faith. I was raised Lutheran, I think, and then we went to a Presbyterian church. My dad was in the military, so I moved like 7 times before the 7th grade. But I think there was some Lutheran in there. There was some Presbyterian. And then when we moved to Florida, we went to a Baptist church. And then I'm back to Presbyterian. So I came full circle. Yeah.
And am I right that for a while you were at Redeemer Church in New York?
Yeah. So we went to Redeemer. We went to their village church, which was kind of a branch of Redeemer. And then, but Tim Keller, we would always go here. Everybody kind of church hopped a little bit in New York. And my wife and I would always go to hear Tim Keller at Redeemer just because New York audiences, I mean, I was included in that, where, we had a lot of questions and we're kind of skeptical. And Tim was just not afraid of those questions. So he always spoke into them with a really rational mindset. And we always appreciated it.
Mm. Well, if you were going to describe this movie, as I said, without giving spoilers, how would you describe it?
Oh, man. I need to get this right because I'm about to do a lot of press for it. So this is good practice. Well, I play a single dad whose wife has passed. And my daughter has started drawing these just kind of horrific pictures. And I, as a dad, don't really know what to do with it. And there's this way, so I take her to the school counselor. I was a school counselor or a therapist, but it's a counselor. Asks her if she wanted these because of a bullying situation, and asked her if she wanted these things to happen to this bully that she drew in these horrific pictures. And she said yes, hesitantly. And the therapist said, well, I think it's a really good idea you drew them rather than did them. And she showed her a blank page and said, because if you did nothing, it just stays in your head and festers. And it was just I thought it was just such a cool thing to tell a kid. And the movie talks about and in the movie, these pictures come to life and we describe it like Inside Out meets Jurassic Park. Because
yes, that's a good description from having watched it last week.
Yeah, it deals a lot with grief and just how to process feelings, and how art is a really beautiful way to process them. And also she was doing something that I as a dad and my son were not doing, just kind of processing it. So it's and Seth Worley wrote and directed it, and it's taken us 8 years to get made. And I'm really both excited and very, it's weird. It's like putting your kid out there and be like, take care of my kid. But it's really meaningful to us and really close to us. So I'm excited for people to see it.
8 years.
8 years.
How did you keep the motivation to keep going? Were there moments when you said, let's just throw this away?
So many. I mean, I would say just in general, my whole career, I've had many of those moments like, now let's just give it up. But definitely, because it was very frustrating. He brought this idea to me back in 2008, or maybe like 17, I think. And I loved the idea. And I was a big fan of Seth Worley's work. And so we had financing at one point, and then that fell through. And then it was kind of in and out of producers. It was going to be a TV show at one point, and then went back to being a movie. And just the hunt, for someone to grab the vision, because at first when they hear the idea, they're like, well, it sounds like the Babadook maybe, but then there's some humor in it. And then they think it sounds like Goosebumps, but then there's this emotional depth to it. So they couldn't really grasp the vision of what it was. And finally we had, Steve Taylor, our friend, said he could find some money for us. And John Irwin was very kind in putting up a lot of the money. And we got it in like 3 months we were shooting. So it happened. Once we got the money, it was really fast. And then it took a long time to do post-production because, as you saw, there's a lot of special effects and stuff. So, but we're super proud of it.
You talk about somewhere co-viewing being a
Yeah.
goal that you had of families being able to watch this together. Why is that so hard to pull off? I think you have here, but it's difficult to do, isn't it?
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I mean, I'm a parent, and there were things that my daughter wanted to watch growing up that I was like, if I have to see this one more time, I think I'm going to go crazy. And I grew up with movies like Goonies. Goonies
Hmm.
was one of my favorite movies, and I remember my parents liked to watch Goonies with me. So there was this kind of family sharing experience around movies. And now I feel like that's just been kind of put into the category of like animated movies that like good animated movies that parents can watch with their kids. But you don't see a lot of live action stuff. And so we really wanted both the kids and the parents to just have a great time watching it, to where if the kids wanted to watch it again, the parents were like, yeah, sure, because the humor was there. I mean, I come from a comedy background with Veep and Arrested, and I wanted the jokes to be sharp. I wanted the timing to be sharp. And so we came in just with that goal. Like, we really want to hit this thing where it kind of appeals to everybody.
I went into the film not knowing anything about it. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the sort of the synopsis of the movie. And so I'm watching it completely fresh. And it was different than what I expected. And one of the things
Mm,
that I noticed is that you have this combination of grief and
mm,
joy
mm,
in a way that doesn't, it's not sentimental or
mm,
sappy. That is hard to do without kind of minimizing sorrow. It's not a
mm,
here everything turns out fine, just hold on.
mm,
Uh, did you intentionally kind of set out to say we don't want to be dark,
mm.
nor do we want to be sappy?
Yeah. It was a very, it was a tightrope to walk. There were times, and Seth was so great as a director because he was so open to feedback. Because there were times when I would want the script would call to make a joke, and I'd be like, "Well, this just happened," or "I don't know where my kids are," or "I just saw a crazy monster. I don't know if I'd be making a joke right now." And so we really always tried to ground it in reality. But to your point, it's like my experience, just personally, with grief and life's challenges, is I have to sometimes take the air out. Like if it stays too heavy for too long, I'm like, can someone just say a joke? It's like, so, or just to kind of get back to some normal. And so we were always back and forth with like, where's that balance? Where's that balance? And hopefully we found it, but it took some time.
There's kind of a reversal in the movie at a certain point where the drawings start to come to life.
Mm,
And one of the things that I think is clearly a theme in the movie is that this is a sign of emotional health, not of
hmm.
emotional distress. And I think
Yeah.
any parent can kind of identify with what your character was experiencing. Look, my kid is drawing these really gruesome sorts of
Yeah.
pictures. How did you start thinking about that theme and message?
Well, it came from Seth's personal experience. This happened to his sister. And so he really had a personal experience to come from where his sister was drawing these pretty harsh pictures. And the obviously, which I would probably have the same reaction as parents were like, what do I do? And there was a therapist who told her this. So this was a very personal experience. But I also, to your point, I wanted parents also to watch it and be like, hey, give yourself a break, because it makes sense that we as parents, I want to shield my daughter from all challenges. I don't want her to have to walk through this stuff. I don't want her to feel what I'm feeling when it's something's going really hard. But the bummer sometimes about life is you got to walk through the feelings. You got to walk through that equation. You got to feel it, and that's how you get to the other side. I mean, I remember her as a child just being like, "Oh, please."
Yeah, and that's especially true when I think that most parents can identify with the situation your character is in the sense that, as one person said one time, there comes a point in our lives when we realize our parents aren't the experts
Yeah,
who know everything and have a blueprint for our
yeah,
lives. And
yeah,
you
yeah,
clearly portray that as someone who is powerless in
yeah.
this situation.
Oh my gosh, that word has just been in my vocabulary for so many times this past few years. I feel like it's true. It's just I am powerless, and it's a really hard thing to feel because I want to control. I want to, like, I don't know, just arrange the narrative how I want the narrative to be. And man, letting go and surrendering to the powerlessness is terrifying, but there's a lot of freedom in it too. A lot. And just to your point of with it being a parents, and I mean, when my daughter, when she graduated, when she was in the house, I remember her always leaving, and I was always like, "Hey, be careful, please be careful when you're driving, please be careful." And it kind of gave me some sense of false control. Like, if I
Yeah.
say it, maybe she'll really be more careful this time. And then she goes to college, and I'm like, ugh, I'm totally powerless. I can't
Yeah.
tell her to be careful every day. And it's that little thing really got me. I was like, oh, is she? And it's like, Tony, you got to let it go. You got to, like, really release her.
Yeah, and one of the difficult things here in the movie is trying to figure out how to grieve
Mm,
when no one has experience
mm,
grieving, when they go through that really deep sort of gravity of grief.
mm,
Uh, how did you think about expressing grief to
mm.
people who maybe have spent their whole lives trying to avoid those kinds of thoughts and emotions?
Well, in our movie, she uses drawing and she uses kind of pictures to do that, and allows herself to go there. And to your point, it's obviously the tree of grief goes into many different branches, many different branches. But hers was drawing, and I just don't even think the dad and the son had a branch yet. They just didn't even know. So the dad just compartmentalized it and then just act as though let's just move on. Now, keep in mind, I don't want your listeners to think like this movie is really heavy about grief.
Yeah,
It's a very fun,
yeah, it
funny,
is.
adventurous movie with this kind of this theme of grief. But it really, I mean, here's the thing: I'm 54 years old, and I'm still learning how to process feelings.
Mm,
I'm still learning. I have had friends close to me die in the past, and I don't even think I processed that at the time. I'm still it'll kind of hit me every now and then. And
mm.
when somebody, which is obviously inevitably going to happen, somebody dies, you're never really prepared. You just have to allow yourself to feel whatever hits you, you know?
I remember when my dad died 5 years ago. I poured
Sorry.
myself into writing his funeral sermon and writing his
Mm,
obituary, and I kind of plowed through that way
yeah.
until I hit a wall. I think I really identified with your character particularly,
Yeah.
trying to find how do I actually grapple with this after everybody else seems to have moved on. Life
Yeah.
seems to
And
have gone back to normal.
yeah, my wife's brother died, gosh, 25 years ago. And that's who my daughter is named after. And I remember her saying after he passed, she's just looking around and being like, how is anybody going on, not like knowing what just happened?
Yeah.
It's so, and yeah, that makes sense. Oh, somebody gave the greatest picture of grief to me the other day. They talked about how it's like there's a rock in your pocket, and it's a heavy rock. And at the time, obviously, when it happens, it's a very heavy rock. But then when you get stronger, the rock never goes away. but it doesn't feel as heavy, because you kind of adjust, and maybe stronger is not the right word, but you adapt. And the rock, this is what I love. The rock never leaves. It's always there. It's just not weighing you down as much, and she felt like that at first. She was like, dang, this rock is heavy. How is nobody else feeling this rock? But as she kind of moved on and not moved on, but just kind of lived life, it wasn't all consuming anymore.
You talked about still learning how to deal with feelings and emotion. Did you learn anything about your own emotional life while making this movie?
Just that producing a movie is not easy. Did I learn anything? Oh man. Yeah, I mean, did I learn it? Yeah, I mean, if as a parent, honestly, since we started this 8 years ago, my daughter at the time was 11. And I, as I'm doing this movie, I'm relating more and more to my character of just wanting to shield her, just wanting to, and thinking I'm making the right choice, when in actuality, it's just my own anxiety of not wanting her to walk through this, and we all have to walk through this, and it's tough.
Did you, as someone growing up, aspire to act and to make films? Or did this happen later?
I think I aspired just to get as much attention as possible. If I'm honest, I just had a motto of like me, like me, like me, like me. No, I did. I mean, I actually was just in my hometown of Tallahassee, Florida, because I was visiting some friends and watching this. I went to the theater that I grew up in, watching a show they did. And I love to perform. I love to make people laugh. I never thought I could make a career out of it. And then after college is when I was like, yeah, maybe I'll dip my toe back in it. I had a lot of anxiety about getting back on stage. And then in 95, when I moved to New York, I didn't know a soul. And I was like, I'm going to try this. And my very first show was Shakespeare in the parking lot, that I did Taming of the Shrew in a parking lot in the East Village.
Oh, wow.
And I just started and it's one of those things, I don't know if you've had this experience where you look back in your 20s and you're like, wow, where did I have the gumption to do that? Because now I'm like, what? But I just kind of had this weird gumption just to keep going. And I had so many jobs under the sun. Holy cow, so many jobs. And then just started doing it. And my type I started doing commercials, and my type was the guy who wasn't all there. And I was even described as like David Schwimmer, but not as good looking. And I was like, what? Sorry? And then I just started getting commercials, and then as I got more commercials, didn't have to do as many jobs to make ends meet. So then I just kind of kept going.
Did your parents and the people back home worry about sort of you do have that gumption, you're going out into the world, and what's going to happen?
Totally. I mean, and to the point of my character in the movie, my dad was like, are you sure? I mean, he didn't want to see me face this uncertainty of the business. I mean, he would give suggestions of other things. I'd be like, yeah, maybe later. I think I'm going to try this now. And he was just like, what? But yeah, they were always supportive. My parents were always supportive, because keep in mind, I moved to the South in Florida when I was in middle school, and I was not into sports, and I'm still not really into sports. And my parents were kind of like, I don't know what to do with you. And so they found this theater, thank God, and signed me up. And I really thrived there and found kind of who I was. But I mean, I'm very grateful for that, but I never could find my place. So they saw what the theater and the arts did for me. So I think they were like because of that, they were very, very supportive.
What would you say to somebody who's in the situation now you were in then, looking at this time of AI in front of us, media disruption and everything else? What do they need to know about going into this sort of life?
Into the business. Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a dachshund.
Oh, sweet. I have two Havaneses, but they're not here right now. They'd be barking too if they were in the house. I would, gosh, I mean, man, There's so many things I would tell them, but I think the main thing when I talk to young actors, I always say, if you can tell yourself that your value is the exact same now as it's going to be if you were to have tremendous success after that, so that your value does not change, because the business tells you you have value when you get a show, you have value when you get this award, you have value. That's what the business is going to tell you. But your value today is the exact same value you're going to have whatever success comes your way. And the more that you can remind yourself of that, the more life unfolds. And then it's, a nice surprise, but you're not giving it so much weight, emotional weight. That'd be a big one.
How do you know, as a Christian, when you're given a script, whether this is something you can? I mean, obviously, I was just talking to some people who are working through Genesis, and you have these really dark pictures of complicated pictures of people. So you have
Yeah.
that. How do you know when a script is something that you would say, I just can't do that?
I think it's different for different people. There's a lot of things that I've done that people I know probably disagree with. But it's a gut feeling. And then there's other times that, and this I think goes for anybody, whether they're a person of faith or not. If you feel a gut reaction of like, this is not for me, you need to listen to it. And I always was afraid to say no to them, because I was afraid, oh man, I'm going to burn that bridge. They're not going to hire me, whatever. But if you can have the mindset that you're doing them a favor, because if I said yes to something that my gut and my feeling is off about, I'm not going to be 100% myself on set. They're not going to get what they're paying for, because I'm not going to be really there. So I always remembered, I was like, I'm doing them a favor by saying no to this. But I would always have a set of 4 or 5 people that if something was because it's hard when you're not working and you need the money and something's offered to you and you're like, I always had about 4 or 5 people that I would send it to and be like, what do you think about this, knowing me? And I did not cast that net too wide, because then it gets kind of complicated. But like people that I really trusted, and then they were able to speak into it and be like, yeah, this doesn't feel like you, or yeah, this feels like totally you. But having that wisdom coming in.
Well, somehow you broke the type you said you were in early on.
Yeah.
Did you intentionally do that, or was that just how life worked out?
I mean, the fact is, I love playing that type. I love playing. I mean, look at Arrested or Veep. I mean, I'm kind of checked out in both of those characters, and it's just fun. I think what helped with that was kind of independent film or doing my own projects. Like this was something that I produced from the ground up, and I wanted to play this character. And so those give opportunities to kind of look beyond that. But then there's other times that people will just see you, or even, that's why I never stopped auditioning. I love to audition because I love to show people, hey, even if something's an offer, I'd be like, well, let's talk about it first, because I want to know that they see me in this role and I want to show them what I can do. So, I mean, yeah, anytime, but typically independent filming, when you're creating your own stuff, is an opportunity to do something different. But back to your question of kind of that gut reaction, it made me think of when I've had these discussions with, other people that are people in the faith and things. I always like to have that discussion if they want to have that discussion, because my life is messy. My life has been messy. And to your point of Genesis, it's just not a pretty bow. And I think many times we are afraid to present messy because we're afraid of sending the wrong message or whatever. But like, for instance, I gave this example once of, if you look at a picture of a cross and you look at a picture of a tree and you ask someone, what's the quote Christian art, they immediately go to the cross. And I'm like, that's a tree. That's a tree that was created by God and is one of the most beautiful pieces of art in our world. But we're so trained to just label something as faith art. And I just feel like, man, we are not looking beyond the box. I mean, it's like we're not challenging ourselves to go bigger. I mean, it's so much bigger. Anyways, that's a bit of a tangent. But
how does a person decide how explicit to be with faith commitments? I mean, there are some people who would say, I don't really want to broadcast this because then that's going to put me into the cross over the tree sort of a picture in my work and in my art, and so I'm going to keep it a little bit subdued.
Hmm.
Some people are not. How does one make that decision?
Man, I think it's just what you just said. It's like it's so individual. Some people might say this, some people might say that. And I know that sounds kind of vague, but just from personal experience, I know that I have made choices that I know other people would not make, and that I know other people have made choices that I wouldn't make. But if people are open to the conversation of why I chose something, I love talking about it. It's like you take Buster Bluth from Arrested.
Hmm.
I really connected to Buster. I've dealt with anxiety. I love doing comedy. I love kind of showing the dysfunction of life. But then he had this kind of really sweet spirit to him. You look at Veep. Yes, Veep is people might consider that a really intense show. To me, it's a cautionary tale
Yeah,
of a woman who lived her entire life only thinking about herself, selfish and egomaniac, never just narcissistic, never looking into somebody else's life. And what did that do? She ended up isolated and sad and lonely.
yeah.
What a beautiful tale to be like, hey guys, just FYI, if you sow that just selfishness and narcissism, you're going to reap sadness and loneliness. That has been the equation for generations.
Mm.
And we might want to take note that you might want to start thinking outside of yourself and loving and being kind, because that reaps something different.
Your character on Veep
Yeah.
sort of as a cautionary tale, maybe of the exact reverse of the theme in this film, which is it seems to be somebody with kind of a repressed anger. He's the object of this woman's, you might even say, abuse of him.
Yeah, I would
Uh,
say abuse.
Yeah, and there's just this anger that doesn't really manifest itself until the end of the series.
Yeah. And he to me, he was kind of as selfish as everybody else, because his equation was if I give enough to her, or if I like he's really kind of what's coming back at him, because he always had that equation like, she's going to love me, she's going to love me, she's going to love me if I do this, she's going to love me. And he actually ignored everything else in his life, did not care who he walked over to make sure she loved him. And obviously that was a bad equation, and he saw what that reaped. Like, it was a bad, but I will say, there was, in the very end, when he comes back to her funeral, and I think he woke up to like, wow, codependency is real.
Yeah.
And I was drowning in it. And but he had to forgive himself and let her go. And I think that's what the funeral was. It wasn't him like groveling back to her. It was like, I forgive you and I'm moving on.
I've never thought about it that way. That's true. That's true. How does a person know who is not gifted artistically, but is just going to the movie theater, watching a film?
Hmm.
How does one know if it's a good film or not? Artistically speaking, creatively speaking, what are you looking for?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, in all honesty, I have gotten a lot less judgmental in that regard in my older age,
Hmm.
because films that I was like, oh, that's the worst. Oh, that's the worst. I have seen these same movies really impact people, and they talk about them and they love them and they rewatch them. And you just don't know how something is going to hit somebody. And so I know my tastes. I know what I like. I mean, I get kind of tuned into acting if I see somebody kind of being a little more performative with their acting, or if it doesn't feel truthful, I have a hard time with it. Like, for instance, one of my favorite movies is Lars and the Real Girl.
Hmm.
And on paper, it sounds kind of odd, like he falls in love with a blow-up doll.
Hmm.
But you see this community embrace him and just accept and walk alongside him, because obviously he's not in a right space, and walk alongside him. And it's the most beautiful picture of community ever, I think. Because in the end, he puts this doll to death, really, because he needs to move on, and they mourn with him. And it's such a wacky idea. It was directed by this guy, Craig Gillespie, but it's done so truthfully and so grounded that I'm like, oh, you can take me anywhere with any story when it's that grounded. And it was so beautifully done. So that's my kind of my taste, where somebody else might believe and be like, I didn't really get it, but I love this. So I don't know. It's hard to gauge. I've gotten a lot less critical. Well, my wife might disagree, but
Well, and I imagine because you you know all of the inner workings in the way that just a regular person would not know watching a movie as to what good acting is, what sorts of plot points ought to resolve in this sort of way and that sort of way. So I imagine you probably have the temptation to be more critical than the average person.
yeah, there's that. And there's also, I know what it takes to get a movie made. It's hard to get a movie made. And so my hat's off to anybody who can get that movie on a screen and get an audience. I mean, that's a long road. I have fresh eyes on that. So I'm a little bit less judgmental that way too.
We talked about at the very beginning, Tim Keller, and about the fact that he was able to speak to people in New York in all different sorts of categories. What kind of church does an artistically gifted person need? If you're talking to a church and they're saying, we have this person, we don't know how to minister to him or to her, what advice would you give?
What advice would I get? I mean, I don't even know if I would limit it to artistic people. I would broaden it out just to allowing people to hear people's story and where they're coming from, and not immediately put a formula to it before you hear their story. What I've had to learn in Hollywood is people are coming from such different backgrounds. So when they hear I'm a person of faith, there are so many filters out there that they're looking through, whether it be religious trauma or whatever they went through. So I need to hear their story before, and by the way, even if they want to talk about it, sometimes they don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. But if they ask to talk about it, I want to hear their story first, because I have no idea what filter they're looking through. And that's what I feel like we as people of faith are not understanding, is all these stories out there, and they're looking at our faith through their story.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get like, how could they think that? Because you have no idea what they've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking the time to really listen, that to me, I feel like I'm learning more. And I just, as a culture, we need to learn more.
Yeah, I have learned, just speaking all kinds of places, very rarely will I find an angry atheist or agnostic, almost never. But when I do, listening to that story, it's almost always somebody who had a terrible experience with a church or a religious relative, or there's some sort of filter, like you said, through which they're seeing.
Which is really, and just being like, man, this has happened to me a lot when I hear people's story, and I'm sorry. I'm really sorry you went through that. And if they want to keep asking about my story or my faith, then I'd love to talk about it. But if they don't, we don't. Because here, another big thing is like, we think we have a lot more control than we do. Why do we feel like we have so much control? And this just doesn't just go for faith. It goes for everything, to change people's minds. We don't have that control. Now we have control over our story, and if they want to talk about it, great, but you don't have the control to change anybody or change their minds about anything.
We always ask people at the end of this show about Bible books that they would take with them on a desert island. But I want to ask you about movies. You're going to be on a desert island the rest of your life. You have no contact with anybody else, and you get to choose 5 films.
Okay. I would definitely, and this isn't just because I was in it, because I wasn't in the first one, but I would take definitely the first Inside Out, because I just think it's one of the best movies out there. Punch Drunk Love by Paul Thomas Anderson. Goonies.
Mm-hmm.
Because I loved it. Oh man, I'm going to forget something and I'm going to beat myself up after this. I would say, I think Lars and the Real Girl I really do love. It just hits that sweet spot for me. And then finally, I would probably do the Lord of the Rings, the first one.
The movie is Sketch. You can see it theater near you. Tony Hale, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I hope I didn't babble. Probably did. But thanks for having me anyways.
No, not at all.